Sakoku and the Samurai. After the Sengoku period of warring states, a type of civil war and struggle for power, the Tokugawa shogunate was formed by the leader who rose victorious in the infamous battle of Sekigahara. One Ieyasu Tokugawa. Although he had a close friend who was British, known as Mura Anjin to the Japanese, and William Adams to the British, Ieyasu was largely fearful of the unrest that Western ideals and Christianity could bring to Japanese society. He had a strict domestic policy that was designed to consolidate his power as the samurai leader and the security of peace in Japan. As his period of rule continued, and into his son's reign, a number of laws and edicts were passed to form what is now known as Sakoku. The policy would see a period of isolationism, that is, that Japan did not interfere with affairs overseas, nor did they have open borders. Sakoku literally means locked country. There were numerous reasons for this, including that of which is by many scholars believed to be the most prominent: the fear of Christianity, namely Catholicism and the Spanish/Portuguese influence. To a lesser extent is the notion that during the period of Sengoku, many samurai had used overseas trade and conquest to procure wealth to fund their military prowess, which created an imbalance in the status quo. The policy, Sakoku, would kill two birds with one stone. That is, the influence of Christianity would be curbed, and the control of trade would sit firmly in the hands of the shogun, under the careful eye of the Bakafu, the samurai government. It is said that these factors are the tinder, but what was the flame that ignited and justified such a policy among the samurai elites? Some say it was the Shimabara uprising, known as the Shimabara Amakusa Noran. The daimyo, feudal samurai lord, of the time used heavy taxes to build a luxurious castle, whilst also enforcing somewhat tough measures on Christians. In December 1637, an alliance of local Ronin and Catholic peasants, led by Omakuso Shiro, posed a rebellion against Tokugawa in Shimabara due to the local lord's brutal treatment of their kin. Christians swept to join the efforts from across the island of Kyushu. Tokugawa retaliated, sending 125,000 troops, supported by the Dutch, to suppress the movement and uprising. What followed was a massacre and a siege against the castle. A lengthy one at that, lasting months. The castle defended by a small contingent of Christians that had seized it the days prior. Soon after the rebellion was suppressed, it is estimated that some 37,000 Japanese Christians were executed. Any Spanish or Portuguese trader thought to be involved were expelled from the land. The 37,000 were largely beheaded for their disobedience. Katsui, the daimyo lord, was executed. In fact, the only daimyo to be executed in the entire Edo period. After the siege, suppression and executions, Christians of Japan were driven underground, and the head of Amakusa Shiro was displayed in Nagasaki City as a warning to any Christian that would dare to follow the path of Christ. The result was stringent anti-Christian legislation being enforced, and a tightening of the policy of national seclusion. In 1639, Sakoku was in full force, lasting until 1868. Although the dismantling of this policy began in 1853 with the arrival of Matthew C. Perry with threats of war from the US President. Something significant preceded the event of Matthew Perry, which paved the way for Japan's elites' willingness to open their borders. This is something related to my home country, Britain. In 1808, some 50 years before the arrival of the black ships of the USA, the HMS Phaeton sailed into the port of Nagasaki. The HMS Phaeton was disguised as a Dutch trading ship, a crude trick not unlike pirate tactics. Yet, you see, at this time, Britain was deep in conflict with Napoleon, i.e. the French. Napoleon had just successfully annexed the Dutch Republic, and so as Japan was a gem of trade and commerce exclusively for the Dutch, it was a prime target for shenanigans. Notably, most of the outside technology and Western medicines came through the Dutch to Japan. This is known to the Japanese as rangaku, i.e. Dutch learning. And so, the ship sailed into port in 1808 under the command of Pellew in order to ambush some Dutch traders due to arrive later. Phaeton lowered a tender and captured some Dutch representatives. Meanwhile, the Japanese jumped into the sea for safety and were permitted to escape. Pellew demanded fuel, food, and water for the safe return of the Dutch representatives. The guns at the port of Nagasaki were old and outdated, and could barely even fire. Consequently, the Japanese could not interfere. Not to mention, they had only 100 troops stationed at Nagasaki at the time. The Nagasaki magistrate sent a call to arms, calling on 8,000 samurai to come to the port. They were on their way with 40 ships from all across Japan. However, fearing for the safety of the Dutch representatives at the hands of Pellew and crew, he decided to comply with the demands. Pellew did not know of the huge wave of samurai forces and the fleet heading his way. Yet, he learned that the Dutch traders were not going to come this way, and probably realized his chance of surprising them was slim, if any at all. So Pellew set sail onwards, leaving a ripple behind that would be felt all across Japan, and changed the outlook of many prominent elites. This was an embarrassment for the Tokugawa government, and indeed a stressful event for Napoleon. Furthermore, in Japan it began a sweeping movement of English language learning in Japan, and so too Russian. Japan began to realize that, in this era, living in isolation may no longer be possible, that they needed to be prepared for the influence of foreign powers. Returning to the matter of the black ships, some 50 years after the HMS Phaeton, the closing period of the Sakoku, the Perry expedition and the arrival of the black ships, Kurafunerai Goku, was a US fleet of ships that had a number of goals for East Asia. The chief goal was to achieve trade agreements with Japan, using gunboat diplomacy if necessary. The Americans made 2 visits, one to display their intent and deliver the letter from their president to the high officials of Japan. They soon went to China, to relax and then return once more to get their answer, or wreak havoc. A lesser known fact is that in the interim period of the two visits, the Russians paid a visit with a similar threat, as they had got wind of the American ploy and wanted too to get a foothold in the region that was affluent. This mounted surreal pressure on the Japanese Tokugawa government, and so it came to pass that when Matthew C. Perry returned, the Japanese elites obliged. This opened the gates to Japan. It ended the period of Sakoku.